So, my name is Abdul Samad, and I will be moderating this session on analyzing Zakat practices in the US. Unfortunately, Dr. Man Al Quda was supposed to be here. Dr. Man Al Quda was not feeling well, so he had to leave us. And Dr. Rabab, she had a family emergency, so she had to leave us as well. And Dr. Shakir was supposed to be here, but he has to be somewhere else. So, we'll be missing these three individuals, but we have a very good panel right here. I have Dr. Nemat Khan, Dr. Rafiq Wasif, Sheikh Yusuf, Brother Ashraf Al Mubin, coming all the way from Malaysia, and Brother Muhammad. So Jazakumullah khair for your presence. I'm going to hand over this mic to Brother Nemat. So what we'll do is we will pass on the mic. I will be asking them some questions around Zakah, what is happening with regards to Zakah in the contemporary United States, but they can also talk about Zakah in general, what's happening in the Muslim world. As many of you know, that Zakah is not just a pillar of Islam, it has some really profound value with regards to worship and social justice. It is also a mechanism for redistributing wealth, alleviating poverty, and the potential to change the world, and something I have been listening since I was a little kid. This panel is a broader effort with the first annual symposium on Zakat that was hosted last year, and you must have heard about it from Brother Muhammad as he was talking in his presentation, and when I talked about it yesterday. So last year what we did at the Islamic Relief headquarters, we invited scholars, religious scholars, academics, practitioners, community leaders, donors, funders, all together to have a discussion on what is happening with Zakah. And we found out there are some challenges with Zakah, starting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned 8 categories of Zakat recipients in the Quran. And we are still kind of debating about what does, for example, mu'allafat qulubahum means, what does fi sabilillah means, and can Zakat be given to non-Muslims, or is it strictly for the Muslims? How can we address some of the challenges with regards to Zakat administration, which includes both collection and distribution of Zakah? And it is a really it is a time when these concepts are relevant because people are asking questions. People are giving Zakah, they don't know if they can give Zakah to a particular organizations. We have non-profits, they are saying that we are Zakah eligible, but they don't have Zakah policy. So there are a lot of questions to be asked. So what I'm going to do is, in the beginning, I'm going to ask each of these panelists to take 2 minutes, and please share with us who you are, what your organization or what the work that you do, and how your understanding or practice of Zakah has evolved to serve the community that you work with.
Hello? Okay. So I think all of you now knows who I am. Dr. Nemat Khan from Cardiff Metropolitan. In my recent work I just presented, when it comes to like Zakah, being a Muslim, I think everyone knows how much fundamental it is and what is its overall impact on it is. So I will talk about it in the subsequent question answer things, but this is who I am and how my perception is. Please.
Thank you. My name is Rafiq. I'm a professor at Portland State University. I'm more interested in the practices of Zakat, so less on the theological side, but more on how people understand and practice it. So we've done several surveys across the world to understand how people perceive zakat, what they think of zakat, how they're giving zakat. So that's more of my focus. So I feel like there are much more qualified people on the theological side. I'm more focused on the practical side.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm Dr. Yusuf Sultan. I also came all the way from Malaysia. I'm a founder and CEO of Ideal Advisory, a Sharia advisory company where we advise companies across the globe. In our experience, we have advised a crowdfunding company. They are basically doing zakat and waqf crowdfunding as well. So throughout this process, we have designed their zakat governance and how there should be a policy for approval of zakat eligible projects as well as distribution, etc. And also academically, I have been teaching zakat, basically a course on Islamic social finance, particularly zakat, in Eastern University, a private university in Bangladesh. So I will try to blend my academic and also the practical Sharia advisory experience, inshallah. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Ashraf al-Mubin here. I'm a faculty at International Islamic University, Malaysia. Besides, I'm also affiliated and founder of one of the Islamic fintech firm and financial consultancy firm. We do research in zakat, how zakat can be integrated overall poverty alleviation tools, also integrating the technological elements on the recipient part, also the provider part, and also the management part. I'll try to reflect on those points, inshallah, in the discussion.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. My name is Muhannad. I'm a PhD candidate at Little School of Philanthropy, focusing mainly on financial sustainability and endowments. My connection to Zakat is through the research I do at MPI and also through the journals that I'm managing. I'm managing two journals at MPI, and they are both are part of IU Press, Journal of Muslim Philanthropy and Civil Society, and Muslim Humanitarianism Review. And my connection to Zakat is through either the journal and my work with MPI, focusing on reinterpreting Zakat in contemporary society and Zakat policy.
Thank you so much. So I think the first question I want to ask is to Dr. Yusuf to kind of set the stage for the discussion around zakat. We know zakat as a Muslim, it is a fard, an obligation for a Muslim who is actually able to give zakah. But in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala highlighted 8 categories of the zakah. And some of these categories we are still debating and discussing about. So Dr. Yusuf, if you can maybe start us off with what is zakah, how do these categories of zakah, are being reflected about, talked about, discussed about, and especially about the 2 categories, if we can talk about the mu'allafatu qulubahum and fi sabilillah.
Thank you so much. As we know, zakat is one of the very important pillars, 5 pillars of Islam, as emphasized in hadith by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As well in Al-Quran, whenever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions aqimus salah, in most of the verses he combines wa'atu zakah. Establishing prayer is combined with giving zakat. As we know, zakat is basically a sadaqah, but it's an obligatory sadaqah. There are many types of sadaqah, monetary, non-monetary. I smile to our brothers is also considered a sadaqah, and there are monetary sadaqah as well, but zakat is an obligatory one, which is a very small portion of our very specific types of wealth. Often Muslims mix up zakat and tax, but definitely there are huge differences between the two, differences in terms of how we calculate, when we give, how we give, who we give to. So there are many differences. We cannot equate between tax and zakat. Of course, if we can substitute or at least give a rebate of the amount of zakat from the tax amount, that would be good, as Malaysia does, and some other country also are initiating such process. But otherwise, zakat is a separate obligation. Now, when it comes to the categories, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in Al-Quran in Surah Tawbah in verse number 60, إِنَّمَا صَدَقَاتُ لِلْفُقَرَى وَالْمَسَاكِينَ, and he goes on to 8 categories. So these are very specific categories Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned. who are eligible to receive zakat. In other words, who we can give zakat to. Now, because zakat is an important pillar, because it is fard, it's wajib, it's obligatory, the way we emphasize on calculating zakat properly, we have to emphasize the same way on how and who we give zakat to, because the collection, the calculation, the disbursement, as well as reaching the right recipients is equally important. Now, out of the 8 categories, I think most are very straightforward, as you also mentioned. Fuqara, masakin, basically the needy, the poor, the one who doesn't have anything, or he has something but he cannot survive. Then we have Ibn Sabil, basically the one who is musafir, who is a traveler, gharimin, who is in debt, and so on and so forth. The 2 categories which we have a lot of ikhtilaf on, and these ikhtilafs are basically fiqh ikhtilaf, meaning grounded on fiqh, grounded on understanding of Quran and Sunnah, the traditions. One of the 2 categories is basically sabilullah, fi sabilillah. Literally it means in the ways of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now what it means? So we'll see scholars differ in the interpretation. There are strong grounds in the interpretation, so we have due respect to all of them. There is an interpretation that only it refers to those who are on the ground defending Islam, by way of defense. And there is also interpretation that it can be broader. It can mean anything that somehow is contributing to i'lau kalimatillah, meaning the rise of the Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's words, meaning, for example, any charitable work, anything that promotes Islam, etc. When it comes to mu'allafat qulubuhum, the category which is meant to soften the hearts, now who should we soften the hearts for? Is it for non-Muslims or Muslims? So initially, definitely it was for non-Muslims, how we can soften the hearts so that they become Muslims. But later on, there is also traditions by the Sahaba ridwanullahi alayhim ajma'in that this category may not be applicable later on, because we don't need to soften their hearts, because Islam was victorious at this moment. Now, should we take that as an absolute opinion, or today we can say no, it's not the case. Today we don't have that situation anymore, so the mu'allafa qulubuhum we can again broaden it. Again, this is an fiqhi ikhtilaf. So in such cases, what I personally advocate for is first and foremost to respect the opinions of the ulama, and secondly to respect the ulama of the jurisdiction of the country. I, as someone coming from Malaysia or from Bangladesh or that part of the world, I don't see myself in a position to comment on the situation of, let's say, the North America. The ulama of this country, if the jurisdiction, they are in a higher position to comment on that should we extend the mu'allafa qulubuhum to non-Muslims as well? Should we extend the fi sabilillah category to a broader scope as well? I think they are more eligible. So if you have these scholars' opinion, I think why not? As the fiqh is broad, the ikhtilaf is there, and there is also a saying, ikhtilaful ulama is like a rahmah. The difference of opinion of scholars is like a blessing. When you have opinion on both sides, either of the opinion you take, still you are within the Islam. I think I would conclude on that. Jazakumullah.
Jazakumullah khair. Thank you so much for, I think it really set up the stage on the zakah, and I'll have some follow-up questions. I'm going to go quickly to Dr. Rafiel. And if you can quickly talk to us about the practices of zakat. So what do we know first about zakah given by Muslims in the US? I think we talked about that. And, following on that, what advice would you give to nonprofits interested in using zakah funds and to localize their zakat efforts?
Thank you. I think most of my comments come from our survey on zakat. So I think going back to my esteemed colleague, we asked people, this scholarly debate has existed for a while, if zakat a charity, is it a tax? And we've asked this question from a bunch of different people, and there's a scholarly opinion. We were just asking normal respondents what they think. So I think in the US context, we find that more people are likely to consider zakat a charity. but there's still a substantial, maybe 30% that's still considered a tax. So again, this is that a literacy problem? Is that a different in opinion problem? As you said, different in scholarly opinions are sometimes a rahmah or a blessing. So there is that kind of thing that we are finding. But in other parts of the world, it really is contingent. So in some parts of the world, I think Nigeria, I think more people were thinking of it as a tax. So again, that kind of just shows how different people are interpreting it differently. In the US, I think around $1.8 billion are being given based on our estimates to Zakat. So again, that shows just the potential as well as just the kindness of the Muslim community here around Zakat. Most of the donors that we found are more likely to give are middle-aged, 30 to 39. Men are 6 times more likely than women to give zakat, which for nonprofits provides this unique opportunity to tailor their messaging to really reach out to some of the women, because again, women are becoming one of the biggest demographic of giving. And again, if you really want to make it more equitable and more accessible, try to make some of those zakat convocations much more accessible to women. In particular, that's one thing we've kind of definitely found in our work. Again, going back to some of the questions, I think there is the zakat transparency issue that shows. And so again, for nonprofits, I think it's really important to focus a lot on their transparency in terms of how it's being used, even have separate zakat accounts to make people more comfortable around how it's being used and kind of having some of those conversations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And quickly, if I can go to Dr. Ashraf Al-Mubin. Oftentimes, when we talk about zakah and who it should be given to, and for what purposes it should be given to, some people say the first, focus should be like food security, for example, or there are a number of other causes. But the question I wanted to ask you in particular is like, can zakat be used as a tool for long-term development rather than short-term relief? And if so, how?
Interesting question. Traditionally, we know zakat for short-term solving problems. But just to brief, right? We don't have much time. Yes, answer is briefly yes. How? For example, let's say human capital development, education. Someone needed to can't pay the tuition fees, but it actually can the spillover effect for the long term. Or zakat is an integrated tool where the waqaf, with the qard hasan, zakat can be part of the integrated system to solve the problems. So there are different other mechanisms. Just one brief example, Center for Zakat Management in Bangladesh, that actually using zakat as a microfinance tool for long-term development. So yes, there are many other avenues actually we can work on that, of course, with the approval of the Sharia scholars.
Thank you so much. And if I can go to Brother Muhammad. Sure, go ahead.
The other thing I think based on our survey we are finding is most people are focusing on giving zakat for short-term needs. So again, there is that space to educate them, provide them more resources, to turn them into a resource for long-term gain. So I think that's one thing we are finding on our survey in Pakistan, in the US too.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for adding that. So, Brother Muhammad, I think we worked on the report on zakat as well, and we highlighted some challenges faced by the communities, particularly in translating zakat in contemporary local context. So if I give you an example, in Chicago, Zakat Chicago has their own zakat policy. And the zakat that they collect, they only give to people in Chicago, for example. In Houston, there are organizations, they are collecting zakat, and they have their own ways of looking at zakat. And obviously, they're all consulting with some scholars who have knowledge about Sharia, who have knowledge about practice of zakat and all of that. So the question I wanted to ask you is, what are some challenges faced by our community in translating zakat in the local context? And how can we overcome these challenges?
So nothing that hasn't been said, honestly. I think, and I will start from where you finished, which is like interpreting or translating these 8 categories in this contemporary society might change like not from country to country, but even from community to community, as you just mentioned here in the United States. And as Sheikh Yusuf was mentioning, like fi sabilillah historically was like connected with war purposes and giving for military purposes, but now we see some changes in that interpretation or different translation to include more categories, including da'wah fi sabilillah and inviting more people and promoting Islam, etc. So these changes change as the context change, which is basically time and place. And again, this is one of the biggest challenges, like how can I define the poor? How can I define the المؤلفة قلوبهم or في الرقاب? What does it mean today? We don't have slaves today, so what does it mean today? Does that mean just prisoners, any prisoners, Muslim prisoners, non-Muslim prisoners? So this is one of the biggest issue, and probably I will connect it to the solution at the end. But before that, the second issue I believe is the governance structure of zakat. And I'm sure some of you encountered different structures of handling zakah. And the same example that I was giving earlier about waqf is that sometimes in one city, different masajid are dealing with zakah in different ways. Some of them do not trust giving their zakah except to the imam because he has a sharia background and he knows how to interpret the ayah and what qualify as poor, what qualify as fi sabilillah, what qualify al-mu'allafa fi qulubuhum. Some of them just give their zakah to the board member, either they have sharia background or not. So you can see the issue here that we're not dealing just with sadaqah here. Like zakah is more structured in Islam and it has its rules. It's not just donation. Like you have to stick to some principles and rules. And the lack of the structure is causing so much problems on should I give my zakat to this masjid? Should I give my zakat to this scholar? Should I give my zakat to this organization? It might not be a masjid. طيب, when it comes to who is distributing zakah or handling the zakah, is it someone with a sharia background? Is it just board member? Either they do have the background or not. So I think this is another big challenge that we are facing, and we see a lot either throughout the literature or the data we collect ourselves. And I think the solution is something that we've been talking about, which is a zakah policy that actually bring all Ahl al-Dhikr or Ahl al-Ilm and together, like rooted and stemmed from fiqh al-waqi', fiqh al-muwazanat, fiqh al-masalih wal-mafasid, all these things, and they come with an ijtihadi opinion that actually works for this secular system that we live in, and actually work with the culture and with the people who live in this country. And as I was saying, Islamic Relief already started this effort. If we can have that policy signed by these scholars, that they approve of it, and we can disseminate that policy, I think it will address so many issues on how zakah should be distributed to whom, as Sheikh Yusuf was saying, and of course the governance challenges as well.
Thank you so much, Jazakallah khair. I'm going to give the floor to Dr. Nemat Khan. And I mean, talking about now we hear from the research side, the data on zakat, we have some of the practices, and then we have some understanding of what's happening around the world with regards to zakat. So I just wanted to ask you if you can reflect upon the takeaways that we can take from these.
The first caveat I have is that I'm not expert of the zakat is per se. But the thing is, in the last 2 days, my sincere reflection is that I learned a lot about the US system and how they are doing it and how well they are doing it. From the practitioner point of view, from different survey and things, that a lot of a good industry a lot of good work is going on. Like this is like first time I'm learning about this, and the way Islamic finance is flourishing in the US, that's astonishing. While build on the things, I think I will build on your presentation yesterday. If, for example, if I have opportunity to work on this from a research perspective, like you talked about 6 myths in about zakat in the US. So I will take this really a good 6 questions either. You did a good empirical work on this, but the thing is, I think we should go more in depth in this to know about the real cause of this. Based on the structural things, the regulations in the US system and things like this, that why the people have this 6 myths about the zakat. And I think if we go more deep inside in these questions, I think we will find the good solutions in order to address those things. And me, I am not saying that your organization is not doing these things, but this is just a lead where we should go more in depth in order to find more robust solution for these myths and then the possible practical implication as well. Other thing is, I think Mufti Sahab will better explain this point, that what is in Quran and Sunnah the ultimate objective of giving zakat. I think and whatsoever the practicing is going on, to what extent they have achieved it. For example, Quran and Sunnah is saying that the zakat is for the social justice, it is saying it is for the purification of the soul, or its distribution of wealth. Okay, so if these are the outcome, so what is the extent through this current system or current distribution they have achieved, and what is the implications?
Thank you. And before, I think I wanted to come to you, Dr. Yusuf, as well. So maybe you can reflect on this, but I think the question I have for you is, clearly we can see there is the disconnect between the current practices with regards to zakat, no matter if it is in the US or outside the US. That's one thing, the practices of zakat. And the second thing is, what is the potential or what is the essence of zakat? So the question I have for you is, how we can address the key challenges in the administration of zakat, which mostly is collection and distribution. There are ethics of zakat administration. And I think one of the categories I want you to also reflect upon is, we talked about mu'allafatu qulubahum and fi sabilillah, but what does al-amilin alayha? The zakat can also be given to those who administer zakat, for example. And we don't see that in practice very much. And then maybe for some organizations it's a taboo. But how do we kind of unpack these challenges?
Thank you. So many questions, so I will try to address a few. First one is on governance and administration. I think that is very important because end of the day, zakat is an obligation, is an ibadah. We are trying to discharge that obligation through the disbursement of zakat, properly calculating zakat. So the end-to-end transparency and governance is a key. For that purposes, I think today, alhamdulillah, when we are talking about these things in 2025, we have several standards. For example, if we look at IUFI standards on zakat, there is a proper standard on how the modern applications of zakat looks like, as well as the zakat accounting standard. There is a governance standard for waqf, which applies a lot for zakat administrative bodies as well. So these things can be referred to, and then there are zakat governance standards by BASNAS and many other institutions globally. So that is very important, and we cannot emphasize on that more. Today, with the advancements of technologies, I think people are so fascinated with blockchain because of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, etc., to, in other words, in a very layman term, to get rich quickly. But if we look at the gist of that, such technologies, which is bringing the transparency, I remember around in 2018 or 2019, somebody in the University of Luxembourg, they were working on how to facilitate the entire chain based on blockchain. And there were many other projects as well, but I'm not aware of any project that is applied. I mean, there were many experiments, but none of these were applied, maybe most probably. So we can incorporate those technologies. A lot of discussions were on AI. We can have even AI on scoring the eligibility of the zakat recipients and ensuring efficient and proper effective distribution as well. On the categories, for example, you mentioned al-amil alayha again, this one, and also a brother mentioned about the one you mentioned, fi riqab. Should we apply that for prisoners? I think all these modern interpretations can be done by the ulama, and something that should be emphasized on is ijtihad jama'i for these cases, collective ijtihad. The Secretary General of Islamic Fiqh Academy, Dr. Sano, Qutb Sano, he always emphasizes on the importance of ijtihad jama'i in such cases. I think that is very important. But just to give a context, the al-amil alayha, the fuqaha usually emphasizes on this when the status is given by authoritative body. Now, who can be an authority? Like, let's say in the context of Malaysia, we have the sultans of each state who controls the religious aspects, including the aspects of zakat and waqf. Now, they have zakat bodies in each state, Selangor, Kuala Lumpur, etc. Each zakat body can give or recognize an NGO as amil. So you see the chain of authority coming up. Now, when they become that official amil, they can issue zakat receipt, which can be later used for tax rebate. So let's say you have paid 2,000 ringgit zakat, and at the end of the year, your total tax is 10,000 ringgit. So you can immediately just deduct 2,000 and just pay the rest 8,000. And most people do that. So they have that authority to become an amil, and for them no issue. But when zakat administrative body with no such authority, for example, in the West, I will not comment on that, because I think the most eligible people to comment on that is the local scholars. Sahibul Bayt adra bima fi. The people of the house they know better what is going on in their house. I, as a foreigner, I should not comment on that. That's not the adab. But again, I believe these modern interpretations can be broadened to accommodate the needs of the society. Inshallah. Thank you.
Jazakumullah khair. Thank you for that. With that, I'm going to go to Dr. Ashraf al-Mubin. The question, I think, it comes from the concept of how we can better localize the zakat. So there is a lot of talk about different communities collecting zakat, non-profits in general, collecting zakat and making sure that zakat money stays within the community and they solve the problems within that community. So what advice would you give to smaller non-profits who are interested in collecting zakat, but also using zakat funds to localize their zakat efforts?
Okay, that's an interesting question. So we need to understand the local community, their culture, their urf, and the overall perspective and the experience. That's the most. We can't really replicate from one community to another community most of the thing. For example, the way it works in the North America, it won't work in the same way in the Latin America. It would be different. Saying that, some of the things we might consider, for example, their practice, in a way, the madhab and other things they are following, also the technology adoption that they are seeing, we should take the benefit of that. For example, in a community where the technology is much available. For example, I can talk about the National Zakat Foundation and few other larger organizations. They are using AI actually in many cases, even to find the zakat recipient thing. For example, local non-profit, local NGOs and others, they can actually use these zakat organizations to mobilize their resources. instead of doing or developing something new by themselves. Also, once it's come to like managing the fund, transparency is important, tracing is important, blockchain technology, as Badr said, that can be implemented. And again, it depends on how good they can do it. So there are many aspects that need to look into before we make a final decision about that.
Thank you so much. I will go to Dr. Rafael. So if you can start us off with the same question, if you have any advice for local nonprofits and localizing zakat. But also I want you to address the question, so your research deals with zakat practices. What gaps do you think exist in research on zakat practices among Muslims, and how can we also address some of these challenges?
I think that's a really good question. So I really respect, a lot of scholarly opinions on zakat, but I also believe that it's really important to actually understand how zakat is being done in practice. And without actually understanding how everyday Muslims are interpreting and practicing these practices of zakat, you're not really understanding how zakat is actually practiced. And I think that is the big problem a lot of nonprofits face. They are living in a different state of mind in terms of thinking about how these practices are being done, but we are living in a very different world. And so it's really important to bring it more towards how we're going to interpret it and how we want to use zakat as a tool of emancipation, and not only serving Muslim communities, but also non-Muslim communities, and trying to intersect with other identities. So I think for me, that's really important in the research, and because the young Muslim in North America is facing very different challenges, and they are facing very different ways of thinking about it. Unless you turn it as a tool of emancipation along race, ethnicity, and sexualities, I think it'd be very difficult for people to understand and practice zakat.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much. So I'm going to go to Brother Muhammad, and we have 5 minutes left, so I would ask all of you to answer the question within 1 minute, but also add any closing remark that you have. So the question for you, Brother Muhammad, is we talked about mismanagement of zakat, administration problem, and others. What are some issues you have seen in your research around recipiency, accountability, and then close it off with management?
Is what I was saying, like the interpretation is a big thing, and also one thing that I honestly want to mention specifically is that yes, alhamdulillah, people in the US give their zakah, but where do they give their zakah is a big question, because we found that a lot of them actually is sending their zakah back home because they trust people there more. So because of the challenges that we kept talking about like since the morning, is that it's a clear structure, a clear interpretation, and like one way of leading that effort, and like leading the efforts regarding improving the structure of zakah here in the United States. And I think I also mentioned this in my presentation, is that one of the biggest problems here in the US is that there is no body that can be called as like the leading body, that if I want to learn something about zakah, I would go to this one organization. If there is something I want to learn about waqf, I want to go with this one organization, because they have scholars, they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We don't have this yet. We have different efforts happening by different organization, but having one organization, government take that responsibility in Islamic countries, but here in the United States we couldn't find that framework that gather all the Muslims in the United States under one organization or one way of leading that effort toward interpreting or facing these challenges of today. I guess like no need for like specific remarks. If there is anybody who wants to mention something, I think I said all what I have in mind.
Thank you very much. I'm going to quickly go to Dr. Rafael. And if you can talk about, as your closing remarks, how can academics, religious scholars partner with nonprofits to produce some data that improve distribution and efficiency of zakat?
I think a lot of that starts with asking the right questions, going into the communities, spending a lot of time doing qualitative research to actually understand what zakat means for communities, and also just getting people together. I think nonprofits and scholars and practitioners and all of them are very often we are living in silos. And so if we can bridge that academic space, I think there's a lot of potential there to kind of really bring a lot of change in this world for the better.
Thank you very much. Dr. Nimat Khan, you have anything to add to your closing remarks?
There is one other thing I have to mention about, Dr. Rafael also mentioned about this. It's about the silos we are working in and how to bridge this gap. I think there should be more like social embeddedness of those things if we are really like bringing this Islamic finance into actionable things. Like if I recall a very good book of The Great Transformation by Carl Polanyi, who gave this idea of social embeddedness. And what happened to this great transformation to capitalism? Did it create silos? So many silos. Everybody is working in their own domain. And I think it's very applicable in Islamic finance as an industry and academia as well. So there is more like need of social embeddedness of these oral ideas as well in order to bring it as more actionable work. So this is the final things from my side.
Thank you so much. Dr. Ashraful Mubin, I'm going to ask for your closing remarks, but also help us answer this question. What policy shifts would help accelerate the impact of contemporary zakat models?
Very briefly, theological policy shift, that should be the way we understand zakat. We should have some knowledge materials to understand from the academic perspectives. Theological part is very important, and definitely in the policy perspective, how the technology can actually take it to the next level. There should be, and last but not least, is actually the brother mentioned the regulatory authority for in the non-Muslim countries, organization like AOFI, IFSB, can that be a replacement for that part? Yeah, that's all for me.
Thank you so much. And last question for you, Dr. Yusuf. Add to your closing remarks. I know we talked about yesterday, this way didn't work, that way didn't work, and we're looking for the third way. So we find ourselves in the middle of, there is a strict Sharia compliance. You cannot do this, you can do this. And then there is a very different ground reality that refugee organizations, relief organizations, nonprofit organizations, community they're facing, right? So what would you say is the way forward for us?
Yeah, I think I will share like how it works for Sharia scholars, like how you can involve them in discussions. I mean, it's not only in this forum, in many other forums I go, often somehow Sharia scholars are in the focal point, that they are the ones who don't understand. I mean, I'm sorry to say blatantly, but let me just share how it works for Sharia scholars. I think first of all, we need them to be involved in the discussions. Conversations must happen. You see all the interpretations over the centuries, the broadness of the terminologies, etc. These all happen because of some context, because of some need. So if that need is not visual, it's not in front of us, then definitely that broadness will not come. And an easy way to engage them is you can partner with a religious institution, a Darul Ifta or something like that, and you can organize some seminar or some conversation where you will present a paper, just like few presentations were made yesterday on the data, etc. And based on that, you make certain questions as if you are asking them what to do, right? So they will do their own research and they will also share their thoughts, and from there you get some gist, and that's how you progress. So I think I'm just sharing the way forward, how we can get the Sharia scholars involved, because end of the day, as Sheikh Yusuf earlier, he also mentioned, Hafizahullah, that we need the collaboration between the industry, between like when we are also working as shared advisory firms, we have to work with the lawyers, with the accountants, with the businesses. An intersection between these three together with Sharia. Then that is where we come up with a solution. Same here as well. So I look forward to having such collaborations, inshallah. And we hope with that we can have the solutions that we are long expecting. Thank you.
Jazakumullah khair. Thank you for sharing your insights, your knowledge. To all the panelists, and I would request you all to give a big round of applause to our panelists for sharing their insights.